Hi, I'd like to welcome you to a tour we're going to do of the online website Scriptures.info, which hosts the online version of the Restoration Edition Scriptures. Hopefully, we'll be able to give you some ideas of how you can use it to help with your scripture study and maybe a few tips and tricks, tools that are available that you might not have been aware of. So I'm going to start with the home page here, and you can see on the desktop layout how things look. We have links directly into each of the volumes of Scripture on the left, including a link down to the Glossary of Gospel Terms, a glossary as it's called. We also have some information across the top in the navigation. You'll see a link back to the home page here. You can either click on Scriptures or Home to get back at any time. There's also some additional information on the About page, tools and tips, a reference converter, downloads, and contacts. We'll go through each of those. The print edition link at the top will take you to scriptures.shop, which is a separate website where you can order print editions of the scriptures. So we're trying to make it easy for you to find that if you need to remember how to get there. I'd like to dive down into each of these volumes and just give you an idea of what the navigation looks like when you're browsing different parts of the site. So let's jump down into Old Covenants first. Here you'll notice that the intent on this page and all the other pages in the scriptures on this site is to try to be as faithful as possible to the print editions, even though it has to obviously be a little bit different layout and format when we're on the web. But you'll see each of the parts of the print edition of the scriptures represented on the website here. And for the Old Covenant, for example, that includes the foreword, the canonization, and the preface parts of the book. If you scroll to the bottom, you'll also see the appendix is represented there. And we'll take a look at those in a minute. In addition, if you dive into one of these, let's look at Genesis, for example, you'll notice at the top of the page it has what we call a breadcrumb trail that'll help you to keep track of where you are in the volumes of Scriptures. So we're in Old Covenants and the book of Genesis. And then each of the chapters has a number, a link at the top, a numbered link, where if you mouse over it, it will give you the text at the very beginning of that chapter. Just below that, you can see a longer list of the initial part of each chapter. You can scroll down those if you're trying to get an idea of where you want to jump into the text. That can be helpful. So let's jump into one of these. I'm going to jump into chapter 1. And you'll notice now that it shows that we're in Genesis 1. And it has each of the paragraphs listed. They are numbered. These are no longer verses, as you're likely aware. And we'll go over some of the tools that are associated with that in a few minutes. But as far as navigating, I want to point out that at the top of the page and at the bottom, there are buttons that will go forward to the next chapter or back to the previous one. In this case, previous takes you back to the preface, but if we go forward, you'll see that we're in Genesis chapter 2. Now, there is one other shortcut that is not listed, but which you can use, and that is if you have a keyboard on your PC or your Mac or whatever you're using, you can hit the right arrow key and you can go forward to the next chapter, or the left arrow key will take you back a chapter. So if you're trying to flip through quickly, sometimes that can be helpful. Okay, let's jump over to the New Covenants for just a moment, and you'll notice when you go to the New Covenants, either the New Testament or the Book of Mormon links, it actually groups both the New Testament and the Book of Mormon together as an homage to what Joseph Smith intended with the publishing of those two being together in a single volume. Of course, that's the way it is now in print for the New Covenants, but we also present it that way on the website as a combination of both together. So you can jump to both the forward to the combined texts or the New Covenants, as well as the canonization section at the top here, and then to individual books within each of them, and it also has the individual preface to each of them, the introduction, dedication, and testimony of witnesses in the Book of Mormon, and if we scroll to the bottom, again, there's an appendix. I'm going to jump to the appendix for the Book of Mormon, just to give you guys an idea of what's here. This is just like in the print edition. There are correlation tables for each of the 3 volumes. For example, here at the top, you can see the Restoration Edition chapter and the equivalent Community of Christ or LDS Edition chapters that those map to. If I scroll down a little ways, about halfway down the page, you'll find that there are also there's a correlation table that goes the opposite direction. So if you're starting with an LDS Edition chapter or Community of Christ Edition chapter, you can find the equivalent Restoration Edition chapters there. So let's jump back up to the top. And let's now jump over to Teachings and Commandments, which is a little bit different structure than the first 2 volumes that we looked at. So there's, again, at the top here, the foreword, canonization, preface, there's an introduction, and the epigraph that you'll find in the text. You can look at each of those. And then with the sections in Teachings and Commandments, what we've done is provided numbered hyperlinks to each of those. And for the sections that happen to be the equivalent of books, where they have parts or lectures or chapters, those have names, and these are the same names that you would see in the table of contents for Teachings and Commandments in print. And that helps you to find those in particular if that's what you're looking for. If you mouse over any of these hyperlinks, you'll see that it has just the initial bit of text from that section. So if you're quickly trying to find something that might be helpful to you, you can also collapse these sections here and get a little easier access to what's in the appendix, the different parts of the appendix, including some endnotes, including revelations that are excluded and explanations for those, just like we have in print. The prophet's prerogative, correlation tables, timeline of the fathers, maps, just like you find in the appendix of the T&C. And of course, a glossary of terms is also part of the T&C appendix. That you can find down here. We also have it called out under Teachings and Commandments and the left-hand navigation to make it easy to jump right in there if you're trying to get to it. And before I jump in and we look more closely at that, notice at the bottom there are section previews. If you expand this, it's kind of like we saw in other books. You'll see just a little preview of each section. That may help you to find the one that you have in mind. You can, of course, search through those. Let's jump to the glossary of terms that is included here. So a glossary of gospel terms has an introduction at the top, which you can expand and read through, and that should give you some guidance for what is included here. That's just like in print. All of this is in print. We also have hyperlinks to different sections of the glossary by letter of the alphabet. So if you're looking, for example, for something in the T section, you can click on T and it will take you down to each of the entries in a glossary of gospel terms that begin with the letter T, and then you can click down into those and read that particular entry. And again, the breadcrumb trail at the top helps you to keep track of where you are as you're scrolling through these. All right, I'm now going to go through and look at some of the navigational links across the top, and then we'll start looking at some of the tools that are available. So as I mentioned before, if you click on Scriptures or Home, it will take you back to the main page here. That's a quick way to get back. On the home page, you'll see that we have links to the Tools and Tips page, which is always in the navigation at the top as well, the About page, and an Announcements page. The Announcements page will always be linked from the home page of the site, and if you jump to that page, you'll see that all the announcements over time that have been placed on the site are here and available for you to scroll back through so you can catch up on any recent updates and what's available. And we'll look at some of these different parts here in a few minutes. The About page gives you, again, a high-level description of what this site contains and what version of the Restoration Edition Scriptures are currently available here. The Tools and Tips page we'll spend quite a bit more time on in just a few minutes. It includes valuable tips and tricks for using the site for your gospel study. And all of the things we'll be talking about will be available for here in this location for you to go back and look at later. So don't worry about losing track of things. The reference converter is a reference conversion tool where you can convert a scripture reference both to and from Restoration Edition scriptures. We'll come back to this. The downloads page has a number of different things that you can download. At the moment, it is just the PDFs for the scriptures. So if you'd like to download one of these and either print a page or two or search through a PDF, you can pull these down. The PDFs are exactly what has been printed for the leather-bound editions and what is currently being printed for the paperback and hardback editions. So the layout, the page numbers, and everything else will exactly match what is in print when you grab any of these. Also on this page, we have some PDFs that will allow you to see what has changed between the May 28 edition, preview edition of the scriptures, and the finalized edition that came out a little while later in 2019. And you're going to find some more tools on the website that will help with that. We'll be evolving that going forward. One thing that's missing from this web page at the moment are the ebook versions. So we temporarily took down the ebook versions that were linked here before. So for Kindle and other ebook formats, we took those down because we do not have the finalized version of those available yet. That's being worked on. And as soon as those do become available, we will post an announcement on the website so that you'll know to come back here. You can find those, download them, and use them with whatever ebook reader you have and enjoy studying your scriptures with. The contact page has a simple form you can use to send us a message. If you come across any errors or problems on the site, even what you think might be an error in the text, you can use this to let us know. Or if you have suggestions, maybe there's something you find particularly annoying and you'd love to know if there's some better way to do it, or if we might be able to make some change, please send us a message here, contact us, let us know. It's been really valuable what we've gotten back from visitors in the past in finding those sorts of issues and getting them fixed. We've got a small crew working on this site, and we've got people that come to it using many different tools. So using Chrome browsers, Safari, on phones, on tablets, on Macs, on PCs, and there's just a lot of variety, and we aren't able to always test everything exactly the way we'd like to. So we appreciate you letting us know when you see something that's out of place or not working right. Okay, I'd like to now jump in and take a look at a few of the different tools that are available on the website to help you with your study online and even offline. So I'm going to jump over to the Tools and Tips page. This is linked at the top in the navigation. The first item it has listed is the text size for reading feature on the website. So anywhere you go on the website, if you're using a desktop version of the app or on your mobile version, you'll see it at the top of each page. There are 3 buttons with capital A. Those buttons allow you to switch the size of the text that you're reading. There's an extra large, there's kind of a normal, and then there's a smaller version. So if you find that one of the, either a smaller version or a larger version helps you when you're reading on the website, you're welcome to switch that. It will remember when you come back to the website later what version you were looking at, the larger, the medium, or the small, and it will show it to you the way you were looking at it before in your browser. The next one is the Scripture Reference Conversion tool. So this tool actually has a separate link at the top of each page, the reference converter. And I'm going to go over to this and pull it up. What it does is it allows you to take a scripture reference in a traditional Bible reference or an LDS reference. And we have support for other ones at the moment. I don't know that we're going to, but take any of those and translate it into a Restoration Edition reference. So for example, I'm going to grab one of the examples listed down here below. This is Isaiah 29, verses 1 and 2 in the traditional Bible reference. And now if I click on the Translate reference, what it will do is actually show me what the Restoration Edition equivalent is for that reference. And that's going to be Isaiah chapter 8, paragraph 6, because the Restoration Edition uses paragraphs, not verses. Similarly, if I go and I say, let's use Matthew 24, and I click Translate Reference, it will tell me that the equivalent in the Restoration Edition is Matthew 11, paragraphs 1 to 14. And you can go through and play around with these. There are some interesting nuances with some of them, like for example, if you use the next example, John 10:16, here's a little surprise. It will not only take you to the traditional Bible reference in the New Testament, but it will also show you the equivalent location in the testimony of St. John, which is chapter 7, paragraph 12. Similarly, just like you'll find later, is you're able to search for these references. You can use ranges of verses. You can add commas to separate them, and it knows how to deal with all of that. If I go to the D&C 110 example here and translate that, again, this is not, because D&C 110 is not included in our Restoration Edition scriptures, this actually does take you to the replacement revelation that the Lord gave in the Answering Covenant that corresponds to D&C 110. And you can even go to individual verses in D&C 110 and find the equivalent in T&C section 157, which is in the middle of the Answering Covenant that we've received. If you use something like from the LDS, Pearl of Great Price, like Moses chapter 6, verses 2 to 4, it will take you to Genesis, because of course the Restoration Edition Genesis includes all of the Joseph Smith translation, including what we called Moses in the LDS edition. It also knows how to take the LDS edition Joseph Smith history and convert that into the Restoration Edition equivalent in section 1. And one last little tidbit that can be useful is that at least for the LDS edition JST Genesis references, those actually will also get correctly converted to Genesis references in the Restoration Edition. So there's quite a bit there. This translation tool can be really valuable. Keep in mind that when you translate from a traditional Bible or LDS reference to Restoration Edition, the Restoration Edition paragraphs will often include additional verses. We don't try and chop it up into anything smaller than paragraphs when we translate these across. Let's go the opposite direction for just a minute. So here, I'm going to take a Restoration Edition reference, and we're going to convert it back into both the traditional Bible and LDS reference. And we're going to look at Genesis chapter 3, paragraphs 13 to 19. When I convert this, notice that there are actually 4 responses that come back. There are the traditional Bible references, and here it spans a chapter from Genesis 4 to Genesis 5. But there are also the LDS Pearl of Great Price references in Moses chapters 5 and 6 that are included here. Because the Restoration Edition, of course, has an equivalent of Genesis both in traditional Bible Genesis and in the LDS Book of Moses in the Pearl of Great Price. So it knows how to do those. Let's take a quick look at something else. Let's go to the T&C, for example, and convert that. You'll notice here that T&C 26, when it maps across to D&C 42, it notices that there were a few verses in D&C 42 that don't exist actually in the Restoration Edition. That's because they were not there in the original revelation received from Joseph Smith, and so as part of the Scriptures Project, those editions were removed, and the Scripture translation tool is actually aware of which verses are missing and which are present when you're doing that sort of translation. I'm going to now take a Testimony of St. John reference. I'm using TSJ for that book here. There are other book abbreviations for it, though. If I translate that reference, it takes me to the traditional New Testament reference in John and makes it easy for me to figure out where that is. And of course, with our last example here, the Epistle of Jacob, this is the reference for that. There are a couple of other references you can use for the Epistle of Jacob also. This is the replacement for the book of James in the New Testament, which is why it has to be referred to as epistle, but it'll show you the equivalent in James there. And of course, if you're talking about the Book of Mormon Jacob, then you simply say Jacob 1, paragraph 2, and that will convert across. So one of the other things that can be really useful for this tool is this checkbox that says automatically copy result to clipboard. When you translate a reference, let's go back to a traditional Bible reference and translate that. When you translate a reference, it will automatically take the result down here and put it on your clipboard so that you can paste it into somewhere. Maybe it's email, maybe it's a blog post, maybe it's something else. You can paste that immediately in. If you're pasting it into a rich text editor, like Word or email or something, it will include both the reference and a hyperlink to Scriptures.info for that chapter and paragraph, or paragraphs. If you're pasting it into just a standard plain text format, you'll just see the reference and not a hyperlink. So that can be really helpful if you're trying to go through and do quite a few conversions one way or the other. I'm going to jump back to the tools and tips for just a minute and highlight the next section, which is about the search box on the website. So on the top left of every page, if you're on the desktop, or at the top of every page, if you're using the mobile edition, you'll see that there's a search box, and it's actually a very useful and powerful tool if you understand what you can use there. And we put quite a few hints and suggestions that pop up as soon as you put your cursor in that box. Those should be helpful for you and help you to remember what it is you can do, how that can be used, but I'm going to walk through a couple of these. So for example, if I use Ether 1:12 as it suggests and I search for that, what it will do is take me directly to that location in the text, chapter 1, paragraph 12, and it highlights it for me. It scrolls down on the page to it, and actually if you look at the URL, I can actually take this URL and paste that somewhere else too if I wanted to share this link with somebody and take them right to that paragraph and have it highlighted. Similarly, if I want to do an actual search for something within the text, I can type in a keyword or a couple of them, like Zebedee, and the search results will then come up for the word, or I can have multiple words. For example, I could say Zebedee and Thomas. And what will happen is the search results are going to try and find the locations in the text that have the words that you type in closest together, most frequently within a paragraph, and try and find the most relevant things and put those on top by default. And notice that that's what it says it's ordering these results by, is the relevance. So if I change the order by to text order, that will then show me the results in the order that they appear in the text, in the print text. So it's starting in this case with the results in the New Testament, and including after that the results that show up in teachings and commandments. And I can click on any of these, and if I go, for example, to Mark chapter 2, paragraph 7, as before, it takes me directly to that paragraph, highlights it, and I can reuse that URL if I want to share that with somebody else. The other thing that's useful in search results is on the left here where it says filter your results. So if, for example, you have a large number of results, you may want to start to narrow things down. For example, I may know that out of the hundreds of results I got, I really want to look at just the ones in the New Testament. That will then filter my results to just show the New Testament, and further, I can narrow it down by book underneath that. So for example, I could say just show me results in the book of John in the New Testament, and it will now show me only those results. I can remove each of the filters one by clicking on them. For example, I could remove the John filter or the New Testament filter, and it will take me back to the full set of results. Okay, let's look at another type of search. I just clicked on the clear button on the right, and now I'm going to type in something new. And in this case, I'm going to try something like, and it came to pass. I'm going to put quotes around it, double quotes, and this will take me to locations in the scriptures where that exact phrase shows up. And with the recent update we did to the website, we changed it now so that only highlighted it will only highlight the exact phrase and not other phrases where some of those words occur. So once again, I can drill down. Looks like the Book of Mormon has quite a few, but there are a few in the New Testament. I could drill into the New Testament, Matthew, and find it came to pass in the New Testament, just as we were looking at before. Okay, I'm going to clear that. And let's try the minus sign operator. It looks like a dash. So here I'm going to try searching for layman, but I'm looking for any place in the scriptures where it has the word layman but not the word Lemuel. So I'm going to put a dash before Lemuel, or a minus sign, and it's going to try and find locations where layman shows up but not Lemuel. And once again, these are the sort of search results that might help you to narrow down what it is you're really looking for. Okay, let's look at one more interesting feature in the search box, and that is that you can actually search by traditional Bible reference or LDS reference. So for example, if you just wanted to quickly not only convert a reference but go to it, I can type in LDS Helaman chapter 13, hit enter, or click the search button, and it will take me to the equivalent in the Restoration Edition Scriptures, which is the book of Helaman, chapter 5, paragraphs 1 to 9. And it highlights each of those for me. And I can also, again, as always, copy the URL, and I could use that somewhere else if I wanted to. So that can be helpful. Now, one of the other undocumented features, we don't have too many of those, but there's one here. Instead of typing LDS every time, there's actually one time where you don't have to type LDS. And that's if you put DNC Okay, there we go. Make sure it's a DNC at the moment. And here we are. It's taken us to section 157, paragraph 26. And again, this is in the Answer and Covenant. This happens to be the replacement revelation that was given, where that's the equivalent of what was in Doctrine and Covenants, section 110. Similarly, if you have a traditional Bible reference, the prefix you can use is KJV, and then you can put in something like Matthew 24, and it will take you to the equivalent. You can also put LDS as a prefix and put a Bible reference in, and it will do the same thing. Now, keep in mind that when you're typing in a reference to some location, if there's more than one chapter that translates to, or if it goes to multiple different places, you will only be taken to the first chapter and paragraphs, and not the second half of it, because we can't show you more than one chapter at a time on the website. So that's one limitation, and that's where the reference converter can come in really handy when you're trying to get to an equivalent location in the Restoration Edition Scriptures. As you've probably noticed already by now, as I have been mousing over paragraphs within chapters in the Restoration Edition Scriptures, there's a little pop-out menu that shows up on the right. And this gives you a number of options that can be helpful. The first one is to copy a reference. So if you click that, for example here, it will copy to your clipboard Matthew 11:3. So chapter 11, paragraph 3. And then you can paste that reference to somewhere else. Maybe you can paste it into a document or a blog post or something you want to share in email or whatever you'd like to do with it. The second one is to get a hyperlink to the current paragraph. So if you click on that, it will copy to your clipboard a hyperlink that will take you just to this paragraph and highlight it. So for example, I just copied that to my clipboard. If I paste it here into the address bar of my browser and hit enter, it will take me to paragraph 3 of chapter 11, which is where I just had my cursor, and highlight just that paragraph. The next button will actually copy the entire text of the paragraph. You're welcome, as always, to copy text directly by dragging and copying the way you normally would, but that can be a helpful, quick way to do it. And the last option is now related to playing back the text of the scriptures out loud with synthesized speech. So this is not recorded speech. This is actually your browser trying to turn the text that is here into speech that you can then listen to. So I'd like to go over this feature next and give you an idea of how this works, because we can also start it from the top of the chapter, and that's what I'm going to show you first. So up at the top of each page, you'll see that there are a couple of controls related to this. So, and this is for playing the scriptures out loud if you like to listen to them. The first one allows you to select the voice that you'd like to listen to, and there are 4 that are available there. Just be aware that in some browsers, some of them may sound better than in others, because these are not recorded audio clips. This is your Chrome browser or your Safari browser or your whatever browser, maybe on your Kindle Fire or something, that is attempting to turn this text into speech and say it out loud for you. So that's buyer beware on that. The play button is the triangle one, stop is stop, and let's look at the options real quick before we start playing this. So the options, if you click that button, it'll show the options. One of them is reading speed. If you prefer it to be a little slower or faster, you can change it to, half speed or 1.5 speed. You can also tell it that you would like it to automatically scroll down the page as it reads each new paragraph. And if you check the last checkbox, you can even have it automatically go to the next chapter in your web browser when it gets to the end of the current chapter. So if you want to listen to it for a long time, go multiple chapters, that can be really helpful to have that automatically advance. Let's take a look at how this works. So I'm going to leave it on auto scroll. I'm going to close that, and I'm going to click the play button, and let's see how we do.
And Jesus went out and departed from the temple, and his disciples came to him to hear him.
While this is playing,
saying,
I just want to point out that
Master,
it is highlighting the
show us concerning the buildings of the temple.
loud using
as you have said,
a blue
they
box.
shall be thrown down and left unto you desolate.
The page, it's going to automatically.
And Jesus said unto them, do you not see all these things? And do you not understand them? Truly I say unto you, there shall not be left here upon this temple one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. And Jesus left them and went upon the Mount of Olives. And as he sat upon the Mount of Olives, the disciples came unto him privately.
Okay, so I'm going to pause it there for just a minute. Notice that as it's playing back this page, it will keep the controls, the audio controls, visible for you so that you can pause it or play it wherever you happen to be. Once you hit the stop button, however, the controls will disappear, and you'll have to scroll back up to the top, or you may just want to use the button that pops out on the right to play from whichever paragraph down within the chapter you'd like to. So if I click play from this paragraph...
And now I show unto you a parable. Behold, wherever the body is, there will the eagles be gathered together.
Okay, you can see how it starts playing from the paragraph that I had highlighted there. And I just paused it. I could hit play to resume it, but I think we're going to stop there on this feature for now. Okay, let's look at one final tool here. I'm going to go to the Tools and Tips page again. This is also currently linked from the home page, but that will likely change soon. If I scroll down a little bit on the Tools and Tips page, you'll notice that there's a section on tracking changes to the text. So From the time of the final publication on November 25th of 2019 with the first edition, first printing, or in other words, what is the leather-bound edition of the Scriptures, we are continuing to notice and keep track of errata in the Scriptures, or in other words, errors that have been found or noticed in what was printed. If you go to the change tracking page, you'll see that each of those changes are tracked here. We are making those updates when it's discovered that there are errors. We're making those updates on the website. These are not, for the most part, versions that are yet in print. At some point, if there's another printing of leatherbound in the future, they would be included in that, but they are not yet. If you click on the link up at the top to expand the background on updates to online scriptures, you'll see that short description to give you an idea of why there are any further changes on the website, what's behind those. Then you can use this tool, if you would like to, with your print edition scriptures. And what we've done to make this easy for you, or at least easier for you to be able to make those updates in your scriptures if you choose, is that you can first select the print edition that you currently have in your hands. For example, right by default, it's showing the paperback or hardcover edition, which is 6 separate volumes that's currently available as of the time of this recording. But also you can switch to have it show you the information in terms of the leather-bound edition of the Scriptures, which is a 3-volume set. So let's leave it on the 6-volume edition for a moment. And you can also change the sort order. So by default, it's going to show these changes by the date that they were added to the website, not by the order that they appear in the printed text. But you can switch to the text order if you would like. So the text order can be helpful when you are trying to initially update your scriptures and you'd like to go through in order, flip through your pages in your books and make those updates. And what we've done to make that simple is include the volume where the change is. So in this case, with the Old Testament or Old Covenants, there are actually 2 volumes, so it'll tell you which of the 2 we're talking about, and here it's volume 1. It tells you the page number within that, so you can flip to it quickly, as well as the reference for that particular paragraph where the change is listed. And if you click on the link, it will actually pull up that paragraph on Scriptures.info so that you can see what the current version is. But the next column, the change column, attempts to show you what changed in that paragraph and some context around it so that that's fairly easy to find. So here, there's the word even, and then unto has a strike through suggesting that that word was changed or removed, and the replacement is bold-faced, that's to, and then the end. So in other words, the letters U, N were removed, and it now reads even to the end instead of even unto the end. Now sometimes that can be a little bit hard to see with this strike-through notation and boldface, so if you click the button here, it will actually show you what it looked like before and after the change was made. Sometimes it can be a little bit clearer when you're trying to quickly run through these and understand what happened. Every so often with some of these changes, you'll notice that there are changes that have an explanation or comments that are associated with them. And for example, I'm going to jump down to this 3rd of March 2020 change in 3rd Nephi chapter 4, paragraph 2. That's on page 465 in the paperback and hardcover edition. If I click Show Comments, just below this row, it will show comments about this particular change. I think Chris Hamill is going to be talking about this one in particular because it's pretty unusual. The Scriptures Committee, of course, wasn't given the option of making changes to anything other than really what the Lord directed, and trying to get back to what Joseph gave us. But this is an exception, and you'll find the explanation there that goes with that. You'll find other explanations in other places, in some cases, where it might be helpful or interesting how that change was caught or why that was missed earlier. So please take a look at that. If you have questions on any of this, let us know. This is one page that will continue to be updated every time we make any change to the text on the website to correct any error. We'll always include the page number in the print edition, the corresponding print edition, and so that you can easily find it. Once you've done an initial update to your scriptures, you'll find the order added to the website most useful because you can see what's been changed most recently for any fixes that needed to happen. Okay, and just to wrap up here, I'd like to take a couple of seconds and walk through how the mobile version of the website looks and works a little bit differently than the desktop version of the website. And here I'm using Chrome to emulate an iPhone 6, 7, or 8. Of course, if you're on an iPhone, you're going to be using Safari and not Chrome, but this should give you an idea of what things look like, whether you're on Android or an iPhone or something else. Maybe it's a tablet that you're using to browse. So when you come to the website, you'll see a lot of the same things you'd recognize from the desktop site when you're sitting down at your Mac or your PC. In this case, instead of links across the top, we have what's commonly referred to as the hamburger menu, where you'll see the same links to the same pages. If you ever want to go back to this home page, you can tap on Scriptures or tap on the logo on the top left, and that will bring you right back. So that's always an option. You don't have to hit the menu and go tap on the home link there, but it will work. The text size buttons are going to be there at the top of each page. Just like on the desktop site, I can change these to whatever size suits me for when I'm reading on my phone. And the search box you'll see at the top of each page. And the search box, of course, works just like before. If I type something in and tap on the magnifying glass there, then I get the search results. And now, of course, the order by and the filter are listed right before the results. But I can still jump down through and pull up any of these and take a look at them. So here we are in paragraph 2 of chapter 3, and it has the normal breadcrumb trail at the top and the navigational pieces that I'm used to seeing. Notice that it still has the next chapter and previous chapter, but I can't hover over it because I'm using a phone, so I can tap on it and that will take me to the next or the previous page. Sorry about the debugger pop-up there. So that should be helpful. Let's just look at a couple of other things. If I go to the New Covenants page, this one in particular, because it's a fairly wide page, what we've done is actually shortened the book references to their abbreviated versions rather than having it fully spelled out as the Gospel according to St. Matthew and so forth. So it just says Matthew or Mark instead, and then it takes you down to the individual chapters. You can then begin to read them as you normally would, including changing text size, as we talked about before. So those are the basics. Let's take a look at one other place. I'm going to go back to the home page. Actually, I already am. I'm going to go to Teachings and Commandments for just a moment. I'd like to show you what this page looks like. Again, this is something where it's attempting to optimize it for looking at it on a phone, so it fills the full breadth of it in showing you each of the sections, and you can still tap and collapse. For example, go to the Glossary of Terms, and once again I have the same alphabetical list here. I can tap and then go down into a particular glossary reference, and that's still all available. I do want to show you one other feature that's not obvious and that will show up sometimes where you wouldn't expect it. I'm going to jump down into the text. Let's go to Genesis chapter 1. And if you remember, on the desktop app, we have that nice little menu that pops out when you hover over a paragraph. With the mobile version, again, you can't hover over a paragraph with your finger and have it do anything. But if you tap on a paragraph, like I just tapped, then you can slide it to the left and you'll see the same pop out. So if you want to copy a link to the paragraph or a reference or the text itself or even play from that paragraph, you can still do it. If I tap away from that menu, then it will disappear and it's once again back to what you'd normally see. So that's not obvious because, again, when I tap on a paragraph, it doesn't show me that it's popped out to the side, but if I slide it to the left, then I can access that and use those features within it. And of course, up at the top, it still has the playback features that I can use on my phone to play that text back. So if you have questions about this or anything else, feel free to contact us. The goal is to help you to be able to search the scriptures and use these online resources to assist you in that way for as long as we have this available.